race. If you weren't ahead, you were out of the game. But when everything stopped, we saw the chance to change the game and begin a new path. This time, the bottom line won't be our finish line. This time, we'll chase investments whose real interest is care. This time, every step we take doesn't just change the world, but protects it. This time, our tech advancements will propel human betterment. This time, we will run the longer race, because the most rewarding pursuit is leaving a world greater than what it is. It was once all about the race. If you weren't ahead, you were out of the game. But when everything stopped, we saw the chance to change the game and begin a new path. This time, the bottom line won't be our finish line. This time, we'll chase investments whose real interest is care. This time, every step we take doesn't just change the world, but protects it. This time, our tech advancements will propel human betterment. This time, we will run the longer race, because the most rewarding pursuit is leaving a world greater than what it is. It was once all about the race. If you weren't ahead, you were out of the game. But when everything stopped, we saw the chance to change the game and begin a new path. This time, the bottom line won't be our finish line. This time, we'll chase investments whose real interest is care. This time, every step we take doesn't just change the world, but protects it. This time, our tech advancements will propel human betterment. This time, we will run the longer race. Because the most rewarding pursuit is leaving a world greater than what it is. It was once all about the race. If you weren't ahead, you were out of the game. But when everything stopped, we saw the chance to change the game and begin a new path. This time, the bottom line won't be our finish line. This time, we'll chase investments whose real interest is care. This time, every step we take doesn't just change the world, but protects it. This time, our tech advancements will propel human betterment. This time, we will run the longer race. Because the most rewarding pursuit is leaving a world greater than what it is.
Good afternoon, mayors, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our 7th Livable Cities Lab for this year. Our topic today will be revenge travel, post-pandemic tourist boom, presented together with the League of Cities of the Philippines and in partnership with Globe Telecom. Have you booked a trip lately? As COVID cases subside and localities and countries ease up their border restrictions, travel agents, hotel operators, and restaurateurs say they've seen dramatic spikes in demand in recent weeks and months. People are booking trips and vacations. It shows that travelers are eager to rush out, book their flights, hotels, amusement parks, and other services they have missed over the last 2 years. In that sense, is the tourism industry ready for the new normal in travel? How do we cope and adjust to traveling in the light of COVID? And what new activities can we go through to enjoy the total travel experience? Today's speakers include Tourism Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat, Jojo Clemente of the Tourism Congress, Chef Claude Tayag, Filipino artist, restaurateur, and food writer, and John Silva, historian. This lab is presented by the Livable Cities Philippines and the League of Cities of the Philippines in partnership with Globe Telecom. And now to formally open this seminar, I'd like to call on Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat, the Secretary of the Department of Tourism, to deliver the keynote message. It's been a busy last 2 weeks for Secretary Berna, hosting the World Trade Tourism Council meeting here in Manila, one of maybe the first face-to-face international convention to be held here over the last 2 years, and having to take care of the delegates, not only for the conference itself, but even for post-conference travel. So I'm grateful that Secretary Berna has been able to take some time out to send us this message, which he taped ahead of the conference, today's lab. Let's please call on Secretary Berna Romulo Puyat.
Good day. This is Berna Romulo Puyat of the Department of Tourism. I applaud the efforts of Livable Cities Philippines, the League of Cities of the Philippines, and Globe Telecom to inspire further discussions on the reopening of tourism through this online forum. After 2 years of unprecedented disruption due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the travel and tourism sector is on its way to a full recovery, fueled in no small part by this event's theme, which is revenge travel, the post-pandemic tourist boom. All throughout this crisis, the DOT has consistently stated that our goal is not just to get back to normal, but to pave the way for a better normal. That is to rebuild the nation's tourism industry in a way that will make it stronger, more resilient, and more inclusive. As traveler preferences changed because of the pandemic, it didn't make sense to merely go back to our old ways. In response to these changes in the industry, tourism bubbles and circuits were either created or upgraded and improved. Contactless transactions and the adoption of other smart technologies became the norm, and our tourism workers were further capacitated through skills and knowledge development. To further inspire confidence in the travel and tourism sector, we fully vaccinated our tourism workers, implemented strict health and safety protocols, and elevated our standards to meet exacting global requirements, such as qualifying for the WTTC Safe Travel Stamp. The situation is still evolving, and we are still living with the pandemic, but together, we are now prepared than ever to deal what lies ahead. Part of our response to the pandemic has been molded by the recommendations of our stakeholders and partners, including local government units and private companies who experienced the devastating impact of the pandemic firsthand. It is through forums such as these that we can gain valuable insight on how we can further refine our strategies and ultimately fulfill our vision for a better and brighter tourism industry. One solidly built on the principles of sustainability, inclusivity, and equality. Again, we wish to congratulate and thank the organizers and participants of this Livable Cities Labs event for the steadfast dedication to support and encourage the rebirth of Philippine tourism. Please stay safe. Thank you very much, and mabuhay.
I wish to extend our thanks to Secretary Berna and the team of the Department of Tourism for their initiatives. I think, first of all, to vaccinate all our tourism workers, and as part of really laying the basic groundwork for welcoming our tourists back to the different destinations all around the country. So before we begin our lab and on revenge travel, the post-pandemic tourism boom, let's just review a few safety reminders. First, be aware of your surroundings while the webinar is ongoing, in case you need to stop due to an emergency. And second, always stay safe and practice social distancing, even if you are at home. Now, additional reminders, this webinar will be recorded and will be available on the Livable Cities Facebook page. Questions may be asked in the Zoom Q&A chat box, which includes a feature that allows the audience to vote on questions posted by others by simply clicking on the thumbs up icon next to the question. Some of these will be answered directly by our speaker or their staff in the chat box, while other questions may be parked for later in the open forum. If you are joining the webinar on Facebook Live, you may place your question in the comments section of FB. Our staff will pick it up from there and send it to us in this Zoom room. At the end of this webinar, we will invite you to please fill up our feedback survey. Your response will help us improve our Livable Cities Lab series, and you may also get a certificate of participation by answering the corresponding question in the survey. So let's get started on our lab discussion. And before that, I'd like to ask just a couple of questions. First question is, where are you joining us from? Metro Manila, rest of Luzon, Visayas, or Mindanao? Again, where are you joining us from? Metro Manila, rest of Luzon, Visayas, or Mindanao? Okay, so we have 38% each from Metro Manila, rest of Luzon, 17% from Visayas, only 8% today from Mindanao. So we're a very predominantly Luzon audience at the moment. Okay, I have a second question, and this relates to travel. Have you taken a trip in the past 4 months? If yes, how many? Have you taken a trip in the past 4 months? If yes, how many? Your choices are no, you haven't taken a trip. You've 1, 2, 3, 4 or more trips in the last 4 months. Okay, so 50% have said no trips taken in the past 4 months, but we have 17% who've taken 4 or more, which is pretty good, and at least 23%, almost a quarter, saying they've taken at least taken 1 trip. So it's a 50-50 split among those who've stayed at home and those who've traveled. Let's see at the end of this lab whether more of you are willing to go for a total travel experience. I'm a great believer in really enjoying travel in all its totality across the Philippines. And so for today, let me kick off the lab by introducing our first presenter, Mr. Jojo Clemente. Jojo is a pillar in the local travel industry. He is currently the president of Raja Tours and the president of the Tourism Congress of the Philippines, or TCP, the leading voice of the Philippine tourism industry. Created under Republic Act 9593, or the new tourism law, Tourism Congress aims to expand the tourism industry of the Philippines. It is the private sector consultative body which assists the government in the development and implementation of tourism policies. TCP is composed of representatives of tourism enterprises all over the country, including former secretaries of tourism. So to talk about and to present about tourism destinations in the new normal, or the better normal, as Secretary Bernal likes to say, let's all please welcome Mr. Jojo Clemente, President of the Tourism Congress. Jojo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bill. I think my video is off right now, but I'd like to thank Livable Cities and of course yourself for inviting us, for inviting me to this Livable Cities Labs. It's my pleasure to be here and hope to be able to give some insights to our viewers this afternoon. Let me just share my screen. All right, here we go. Before we can start talking about revenge travel and what is in store for tourism moving forward from the pandemic, I think we need to have a picture of where we were the last 2 years, and just to give context to what we're looking at for the future. Okay, so the subject today is revenge travel. So what is revenge travel? It's basically the idea of taking revenge on COVID by traveling after almost 2 years of being locked down during the pandemic. So this is the trend that we're seeing right now. People are traveling with much gusto, with much anticipation after being cooped up for 2 years. So what led up to revenge travel? Prior to the pandemic, just to give you an idea of where we were, Philippine tourism began to assert itself as a rising star in the country's economy. And some figures to throw out at you, the tourism contributed almost 12% to the country's GDP, earned almost 3 trillion pesos in revenues from inbound and domestic travel. And we also employed 5.5 million people directly, with more in the non-direct employment, such as fishermen, handicraft makers, and other affiliated industries to tourism. So the estimated total employment generated by tourism would probably be closer to about 9 to 10 million people. Visitor arrivals also reached an all-time high of 8.26 million in 2019. Well, the good and the bad news was that based on our talks with our partners overseas in late 2019, early 2020, the Philippines was really poised to have a breakout. It was going to be a breakout destination for 2020 and beyond. So my personal estimate is that we could have reached 10 million in 2020 had there been no pandemic. But alas, last March 15, 2020, the borders were closed. So there went that expectation. Of course, international arrivals disappeared as other countries closed their borders. and limited travel also for their nationals. So we, uh, to make a long story short, tourism really stopped worldwide, and as we can see, only a limited number of people were allowed to enter during this time. LGUs in the Philippines also restricted inter-island travel and virtually sealed off provinces to prevent the spread of COVID. And as a result, a good number of stakeholders in the various sectors, such as hotels, travel agencies, tour operators, tourist transport companies, were all had to suspend operations as well. Of course, we all know accommodations were eventually allowed to reopen and use as quarantine facilities. During the time of the pandemic, an estimated 1 million jobs in the tourism industry were lost. And a lot of employees or tourism workers were also put on temporary leave or layoffs, not knowing how long that would take. Um, Another result was that tourist transport operators lost their vehicles, and a good number of stakeholders also just decided to close their businesses. So the past 2 years have really been quite heavy for the tourism industry. And frankly, I got tired of saying that tourism was the hardest hit industry, because we really were. Okay. Just some headlines during the past 2 years that you may all have encountered. So we lost so much in terms of revenues, in terms of employment and business. Okay. Now, talking about where do we go now, uh, domestic tourism slightly rebounded with loosened travel requirements to popular destinations during the fourth quarter of 2021. So we saw people traveling now to Cebu, Bohol, Boracay. Only Palawan was sort of still closed at the end of last year because of the high incidence of the COVID virus in those areas, and I think low vaccination rates also. But as we all know, domestic travel was again affected by the surge of the Omicron variant in early 2022, which basically shut down the country again from early January to the beginning of February. But luckily, the surge passed after 30 days and we were able to resume. Now, the best news that came was that last January 28th, the government announced that the Philippines will start allowing fully vaccinated tourists from countries that required no visas to enter the Philippines, and just subject to pre-arrival testing and with in possession of travel insurance, specifically with COVID coverage. We did away with the quarantine period, the quarantine requirement, and we also did away with the testing upon arrival. So which really made the Philippines one of the first countries to do so, especially here in Asia and the ASEAN. Um, and just to throw some statistics at you, from February 10 to actually this should be from February 10 to 16, a total of 13,360 passengers, foreign tourists came in, and this was just the first week of our opening. Our top three source markets at that time were the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Of course, a lot of this was made up of balikbayans, but still, they were able to these market segment was also able to engage in tourism activities, and we already consider them as foreign arrivals. Okay. Um, Year to date, or at least until April 24, these are the arrival statistics we are looking at. No, we had 47,000 for the month of February, 117,000 for the month of March, and as of April 24, last week, we already had 148,000 arrivals into the Philippines. So we see a monthly growth as far as arrivals are concerned. So we have a grand total of about 313,050 tourists or foreign arrivals that have come in from February to April 24. We are still seeing more inquiries and more arrivals in the coming months. And in fact, we are seeing a lot of arrivals coming in from the long haul markets because for the simple fact that they have looser restrictions there as far as traveling. So they can leave the country and come back with almost no restrictions. So those were the first market segments to come into the Philippines when we reopened. As we can see, also domestic tourism started to increase as the number of cases of Omicron infections began to creep down and LGUs again loosened restrictions. And I think this was evidenced by all the news that came out of Boracay during the Holy Week, when even the carrying capacity was breached during that time. So Filipinos have started to travel again, and which is good news because even when we were allowing foreign tourists to come in, the bulk of all the trips taken in the Philippines was due to domestic travel. Demand continues to remain robust for the following months, and we expect more arrivals for the winter season of 2022, barring any unforeseen events. My fearless forecast is that by the end of the year, we should be seeing numbers of about 1.1 million to 1.2, 1.3 million total arrivals by the end of 2022. It's a far cry from the 8.26 million that we had in 2019, but considering where we came from, those numbers are actually bode quite well for the tourism industry. Okay. Now, talking about how travel has changed and what are they looking for now that they're going around the world again. Number one, tourists are now looking for more experiential tours, more interactive kind of activities that they can do. They want to do active and tactile activities. So examples of these would be farm tours, where they can actually participate in harvesting or in planting, salt making, for instance, also handicraft making, weaving, things like that. In the 2 years that, basically the world was closed down, people started to realize that they had taken traveling for granted, whereas before maybe you just got into a bus and you look at the sights to your left, to the right, as the tourist guides would tell you to do so, and think nothing of it afterwards. But what we are seeing now is that people want to have more of a deep dive as far as the activities and the things that they do when they visit certain countries. So as part of that, they're also looking for tours that will explain and show the culture and history of the Philippines on a deeper scale. And maybe later, Chef Claude and Sir John Silva can further expound on how that can be done. But whereas before maybe you would have a cursory knowledge of where you're going, now people are more interested in finding going to a deeper level as far as knowing about the country they're visiting. Okay, culinary experiences we have seen is something also that people are looking at. Maybe it's because of the fact that we were all locked in for 2 years, that you were probably eating the same food over and over again. So now people are more they're ready to experience the foods that are being served, or what is indigenous to the countries that they visit. So a lot of and the good thing about it is that in the Philippines you have so many regions with different kinds of food. So there's so much to discover in the Philippines. We have that going for us. And finally, destinations. People will be looking for destinations with more open spaces and less people. They're still wary of the COVID virus and the pandemic. So I think people are not yet ready to be in big congregations or going to places that are quite tight in terms of other tourists. So again, that plays into the strength of the Philippines because we do have about 7,000 islands that we can utilize for that. Okay. And again, just some headlines. We reignited travel in the Asia Pacific as per the WTTC because we were really one of the first countries to reopen fully to tourists. Okay. Now, in the context of livable cities, since that's what we're here to talk about, what does it mean? Well, number one, We need to have sustainable practices in place that would address the expected influx of tourists. One thing about revenge travel is that by the nature of the term revenge travel, people will be coming, and we should take care that we're able to accommodate the travelers that will be coming in. Do we have safety measures in place to make sure that areas do not become venues for spreader events? Attractions do not become venues again for spreader events. How much open space do we have? Things. What can we develop as far as offering our cities to the demands or to the things that people are looking for now as they travel again. We need to develop itineraries such as cultural, historical, and culinary tours that will make cities more attractive. What we have seen prior to the pandemic that is that there was already a trend where people or travelers tend to use the big cities like Manila, Cebu, or the main gateways as just transit areas, meaning to say they would just stay maybe for a night or two because it's a means for them to get to their next destination. Maybe the flight schedule didn't allow them to connect immediately. So I would recommend, our attending audience here, if you can make a difference as far as making your cities more attractive, highlighting more of what is in store or what they can see, that is a way of helping out our urban areas as far as tourism is concerned. Although the Philippines is pretty much known as a sand and sea destination, there is also something to be said about our cities as well. Um, we do have in the Philippines, we have cities, small, medium-sized, class one, class two, and one of the things that we have been advocating also is that we develop other cities around the Philippines to spread the benefits of tourism. With the figures that we threw out to you earlier today, we can already see how much tourism can really become an engine of growth as far as the economy is concerned. And an example that I can use for this is Iloilo. It was really developed now to become Iloilo City has become a preferred destination for the MICE segment. No, as I talk about in my next point, the MICE segment being the meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibits. And with the Iloilo City Convention Center and the supporting infrastructure around it, it rebuilt itself into a destination. So there is such a thing wherein the saying, "If you build it, they will come," will apply, and Iloilo would be a prime example of that. Clark also is a place where they've taken advantage of what they have, and it's now becoming one of the rising stars of Philippine tourism destination. So marami pa. And again, we talk about the Philippines having 7,000 islands. Let's take advantage of that. Um, we can have urban cities like Manila or Metro Manila. We can have Cebu. But there's also, I think, something to be said about the smaller cities around the country. Just focus on the things that we had mentioned earlier, like developing the cultural aspect, the historical aspect, the culinary aspect of your city, and that's something that we can continue to promote to our clients when we talk to them. There is always an opportunity to make our cities more interesting, and as we go along, as we delve into the post-pandemic situation, there will be more chances to make cities a major part of tourism. Okay. Now, of course, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about things that we are looking at as far as the tourism situation is concerned. No, so these are just some things that I put down. Number one is the situation in the Ukraine. Like all of us, we are hoping that this does not expand, it does not grow into a larger conflict, and is resolved peacefully sooner than later. The conflict in the Ukraine has really caused some problems for travel because of most directly is the prices of petroleum products, and it relates to travel because of the prices of aviation fuel, which would drive up the cost of traveling and eventually might be a deal breaker as far as people who may want to travel. Of course, we are always on the lookout for the new strains of COVID. No, luckily, the strains that we're looking at now are just milder than the original strains, but still, we still look at it as a possible deterrent to travel. Should knock on wood, another virulent strain comes along. We're also looking at the resumption of full flight frequencies. Uh, as we saw, the airlines have cut down on their frequencies during the pandemic, and more flights means lesser costs for travel. No, so we're looking at that as well. And what I didn't look at, what I didn't put down here is that it will also be very important as to how our next government will be dealing with the tourism industry or tourism in general. Uh, we were lucky, that at least within this pandemic period, we were able to have good leadership, and we had very good working relationship with the DOT. So the private sector and the DOT had a very collaborative relationship during this time, which made it possible for us to power through the pandemic. And we're just hoping that the same kind of collaboration will carry on through the next administration, whoever it will be. So I think that's my last slide for this presentation. I thank you again very much for having me this afternoon, and we look forward to your questions later on. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, meron pa pala. I think I have 4 minutes left. Just some things, no? Just to go quickly through it. What do we need to have tourism flourish in the next few years? The development of more destinations and gateways. Cities will play a great role in determining new gateways. Of course, we need investments for tourism infrastructures, hotels, airports, ferries, as we develop new destinations. I already mentioned close government and private sector partnership. Of course, we also would need appropriate budget for the DOT for to continue its marketing, also to be in step with our ASEAN neighbors who have more resources allocated for tourism. And finally, the creation of a disaster calamity fund for the tourism industry in case of another pandemic-like event. Tourism industry was considered to be non-essential during the pandemic, and this was a good reason why some of our partners just closed shop or are no longer in the industry because we had nowhere to. Whatever aid was given to the tourism industry was really not enough to help a lot of our stakeholders. So this is something that we're looking at. So I guess that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, and looking forward to answer questions in a while. Thank you.
Thank you, Jojo, for the really comprehensive, overview of what the industry has gone through, what you guys have suffered, and the losses that people have sustained. Over 1 million jobs lost, a lot of indirect jobs lost or put on hold. What we need to bounce back, and what cities can do, and what sort of new features we need in the Philippine tourism picture. And I think it gives us an idea of how we can help, because we're, I guess, on our side, we're the travelers, and there's something we can do to help this industry recover. Now, I noticed you mentioned cuisine quite a number of times in your presentation, which is great because it leads me to our next presenter, Chef Claude Tayag, one of my favorite chefs. So Claude is a Filipino who has pursued multiple careers, enough to last several lifetimes. As an artist, he has had a retrospective exhibition at the National Museum in July 2019, and his artworks are also found in the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Manila and other Philippine institutions, as well as private collections. As a food missionary, he has been advocating Philippine cuisine, the use of local produce, and local travel in his column in the Philippine Star since 2000. His first book, Food Tour, is a collection of these essays, peppered liberally with his drawings and recipes. He is also one of 6 chefs who co-authored Culinaria, a guidebook to Philippine cuisine, published several years ago by Asia Society Philippines, and he served as its food stylist as well. I'm a proud owner of this book, and I use it oftentimes to give as gifts to foreigners. With his wife, Marianne, Claude has co-authored the best-selling culinary travel guidebook, Linamnam. The couple lives in Angeles City in Baledutum, where diners at the by reservation only restaurant will find the couple serving sumptuous traditional Pampango spread in a 3-hour, 10-course meal. And finally, Tayag is the man who introduced sisig to the late Anthony Bourdain. As culinary ambassador, Claude has participated in several Department of Tourism local and international promotions. For instance, he represented the Philippines at the Memphis in May Festival in 2012, where he introduced the dessert halo-halo to US Southerners. I was one of those lucky visitors and speakers at the Memphis in May Festival, where I caught up with Claude and to catch up and also eat some of his food and introduce Americans to Filipino food. In May 2016, he won the People's Choice Award at the Embassy Chefs Challenge in Washington, D.C., beating 25 other chefs from different countries with his version of the glutinous rice dish, bringhe, using heirloom Banawe black rice. He was one of the Filipino guest speakers at the first Madrid Fusion in Manila in 2015. Adding to his many hats, he has hosted the TV show Chasing Flavors for the Metro Channel, chasing the different flavors of our regional cuisines. So today, to speak about food stories around the Philippines, let's all please welcome Chef Claude Tayag. Claude, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Correction lang, Bill. Kusinero lang po ako. Hindi ako chef. Chef-chefan lang. Allow me first to start my presentation by talking about our book, Linamnam, Eating One's Way Around the Philippines. So I co-wrote this with my wife. This is a culinary travel guidebook, which I co-wrote with my wife, Mary Ann, in 2011. Can I start with the cover book, the visuals, please? There. And then the next one with Mary Ann, the Ilocos Empanada. Okay. So it took us more than 4 years traveling around the Philippines, literally. And it is a culinary mapping, if you will, tasting and documenting the best eats every region has to offer, telling the reader the whys and hows of what makes each dish unique and outstanding in its own right. Along the way, we've discovered the sheer variety and intricacies of our multi-layered cuisine, making it easier for the uninitiated to understand what makes the Filipino eat what he eats. It has become the Bible of a lot of Filipino and foreign travelers, selling more than 30,000 copies just before the pandemic hit. So next slide, please. So here's my segment where like have good food, must travel. So we travel for different reasons. I have to confess, I'm one of those whose primary objective is to experience new gastronomic adventures. After all, how much or like how long can one stare at a most perfect cone of a volcano or admire a most beautiful sunset? The visual experience is made much more memorable with a matching culinary treat, reflective of the place. Who could resist the lure of a delicacy specific of a locality? My mouth salivates at the thought of having like Ilocos Empanada. Next, please. The bagnet. Tuguegarau's Batil Patong. The Baguio Longanisa. Batangas Sinigang na Maliputo. The Bicol Express. Cebu Lechon. Dumaguete's Budbud Kabog with chocolate and ripe mango. Where is it? Go back, please. Where's the ripe mango? No, it's not there. Let's see. Can we? Okay, so that's a Cebu lechon. Okay, I'll just follow your lead there. The next one, the Talisay Sunday Market. Talisay is a town outside of Cebu City. So next one, please. And the La Paz Bok Choy, Decos Bok Choy. You see the yellow thing on top? It's a dollop of bone marrow. That's the original, authentic La Paz Bok Choy. So next, please. So at Breakthrough in Iloilo City at the Villa Beach Villas, the owner of this restaurant was a former marine biologist. So I have this tank with live sea creatures. So the first one is abalone made into soup. The second one is managat. Look how fatty the stomach is, and it's grilled the Ilonggo way with achuete and garlic and lemongrass. And then the last one are imbao. They're large bulbous clams, which you can eat raw or made into soup. Next one. And Rojas City, the seafood capital of the Philippines. You have fresh scallops, the diwal, the angel wing, clams, and then of course the fattiest crabs there is, and the fattiest oysters as well. And oh, that's me and Tita Glenda Barreto of Villamare. We were at the market of Rojas City, and I tell you, like, we literally ate our way around the market, whatever we could eat. Remember, since they're the fresh seafood capital of the Philippines, the market, I mean, it's steaming with live, but very, very fresh seafood that you can actually eat right there. I mean, cannot get fresher than that. Next one. Okay, so this is Budbud Kabog, the chocolate at manga at the Painitan in Dumaguete City Market. So Budbud Kabog is like their suman, but made of millet, not the glutinous rice or malakit. And it's so fine and buttery, and I don't know, but you have to experience it and eat it right there at the site, because if it does not travel well, and I've never seen it done anywhere else in the Philippines. So next, please. So this is for me a very, very unique experience and unforgettable experience. We were in Camiguin, and then we rode the bangka to a small island. Ang tawag nila, lulubog, lilitaw. You know what? High tide, it's gone. But during low tide, you can walk around the sand dunes. And there was this itinerant vendor carrying a basket full of urchin. So as you order, they're called, tuyom in Bisaya. So as you order per piece, he cuts the shell, the top of the shell, and then you pour vinegar, sinamak, and you scoop out with a spoon, plastic spoon, the roe of the urchin. For me, this is the most unforgettable experience. I'll go back to that sandbar if I had the chance to. So next one. So this is the grilled tuna panga. For me, the highlight of any Davao visit, Davao City visit. At Dudes, no other place else. Talagang, I don't know, I'm short of words to describe it. Of course, there's the durian also after for dessert. So here we are in Baledutum. So this next segment, I call it like, it takes a village to produce a meal. So at Baledutung, so the best way to know a place is to eat what and where the locals eat. Not only does one discover its culinary offerings, but also it supports a chain that could very well mean the survival of the community. Local cuisine and dining play such a major part of the overall travel experience. When the late Anthony Bourdain came to interview me for his show No Reservations in October 2007, my wife, Mary Ann, asked the producer why they chose me over many other Filipino chefs. His reply was short and simple. He said, because he cooks Filipino, particularly Pampango. When all about him, all around him were cooking fusion or what have you. So where am I? So when the show was aired in January 2008, we got overseas calls reserving a seat at Baledutong to have what Bourdain had. In Baledutong, which was first opened to the public in 2000. So next slide, please. I've always showcased everything Filipino, from the vintage architectural details, my antique collection of kitchen implements, to the cloth runners, placemats, and napkins made from Abele Loco. Note the chandelier, the Chamberlain on the upper part. These are Carabao yoke, bamboo, made of bamboo. And I fashioned the gun out of arurug and handmade paper. So how native can you get? And well, as you can see, the colorful napkins on the table and the Abel runner. So what else can I say? So and that extends to the food I serve here using locally available ingredients. Though the seafood and meats are from outside the province, most of the vegetables we use are either homegrown or from within a 5-kilometer radius out of the city. You see, though Angeles is a medium-sized city with something like a bit less than 500,000 population, so that would qualify it a livable city, right? By your standards, Bill. Am I correct? Like everything is within reach, like maximum 20 minutes, give or take 5 minutes for like 10 minutes if you're in traffic. So I will be like from Baledutong, I can be at Clark International Airport Terminal in less than 30 minutes. And that's barring traffic. With traffic, maybe add 5 or 10. So you see, though Angeles is a medium-sized city, we're still pretty much surrounded by agricultural land. We get a good regular supply of Carabao's milk. Next slide. And these are like vendors, street vendors. Meron niyang regular, may pwesto near the center. And on a daily basis, we can get kakanin, tamales, Carabao's milk. So, and then also vegetables. Next, please. This is a vegetable vendor, a lettuce vendor, along Friendship Highway, which leads to the Koreatown. And this is the kind of lettuce that the Koreans use for their barbecue. So the thing is, what I'm saying is, this little girl probably is a daughter of the farmer, so it cuts the middleman. And the price of the lettuce, if you buy it directly from them, it's like almost half the price if you bought it in the marketplace. So, and it goes on. So they're grown nearby around the city's peripheral small farms. So next slide, please. So wait a minute, so I'm lost. Let's try. No, that it's in the wrong place. Wait. So can we go back? Can we move the slide? Not ready for that. Not yet. Sorry, where are we? Wait. Where is the slide where the guava, the bulanglang na ulang, the sinigang sa bayabas? Nope. Sorry. Please bear with me. Okay, so here. So when I prepare, oh, might as well. Sorry. Can we go back to the burong talangka? Back, please. Some more. Okay. So Pampanga's iconic dishes such as burong talangka. Next slide, the camaro. So the burong talangka, I applied it in a rice dish. And can you move back? Yes, okay. This one, the burong talangka, And then the next one is the talangka rice. It's actually the yellow rice is the base of this one. And I served it at the Madrid Fusion in Manila in 2015 to the delegates. So to highlight Pampanga's best dishes. So next one. And then here we are with the kamaru. The kamaru, they're actually mole crickets. As we've heard that insects is the food of the future. So if you get like kind of have this fearsome, what do you call that? If you're scared of even like looking at it, these are actually very nutritious. They're high in protein, no fat, no cholesterol, and mole crickets are actually pests, and they eat on the roots of the rice plant. So I mean, how healthy can you get? It's probably cleaner than most of the pork, the meats that we eat. So next, please. The stuffed frogs. You get icky. I mean, you're scared of the stuffed frogs. The French have frogs legs. The Chinese they also eat frogs legs. And what's the difference? It's actually stuffed with ground meat. So next, please. These are actually delicacies. So, and the thing for me, this is the quintessential Pampango dish. It's made of like, composed of grilled catfish, the hito, with assorted vegetables, including the kind of bitter, spicy, fresh mustard leaves, the mustasa. And the buro is the burong hipon, the buro rice. It's actually like a side. It's a condiment. It's like a sausawan that you eat it together. So any Pampango, you show this to any Pampango or anywhere in the world, his mouth will literally salivate and hunker for this dish. And it's home for us. And it knows no economic boundaries, rich and poor alike. Eat this. Next, please. So, the bulanglang kapampangan, the Tagalogs call it sinigang sa bayabas. So when I prepare this bulanglang na ulang, so the ulang would be for example, I have to rely on the fish dealer to source from a fisherman to catch the ulang from the Pampanga River. Next slide, please. So this is my other version using the ulang, and I made it into a guava gazpacho following the Spanish cold soup tradition during summer. So this is actually the ulang is like plated, para bang it's coming out, parang Loch Ness siguro, Loch Ness, you know, that monster coming out of the lake. So something like that. So on a guava puree. It's a cold soup. It's perfect for a hot summer night. So next, please. That's my take on the pulanglang. So these are the freshwater prawns. So in English, they're called like crayfish, but they're literally, prawns with a big head, and they're found in the Pampanga River. So this is what I'm saying, that when one prepares a meal, this is a good example, like how the food supply chain works, where everybody benefits. So I have to rely on the fish dealer to source from a fisherman to catch the ulang from the Pampanga River. And then next slide, the guava is either from our backyard or from the market, supplied by a dealer. And it goes on for the other ingredients in making this dish. So at the onset of the pandemic, we've all experienced the lockdown of travel, that even truck deliveries were banned from traveling outside of their locality. We've heard of news like tons of vegetables were left literally rotting on site because the food supply chain was broken. The farm to table term is just the short of it. The farmer has to prepare the soil, buying the seeds, paying for water and fertilizer, employing manpower till harvest time. a dealer will come and distribute the produce, paying a driver, cargador, and diesel for his truck. A market vendor will retail it, again paying rent, electricity for his stall. A restaurateur procures the ingredients, employs kitchen staff to prepare the meal using electricity or LPG, and a service staff at the front to make sure each dish is properly served. In the meantime, the restaurateur pays for the rent, the electricity, the water, ingredients, wages, and ultimately taxes. It literally takes a whole village to prepare a dish. That's my talk. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chef Claude, for that very mouth-watering tour of the Philippines, and also for describing really that it takes a village to give us a good meal, and all the support that we give that village by consuming local food and eating local cuisine.
Yes, local.
Uh,
Yeah.
I am totally like you. I plan my trips around food. And most of my photographs from trips are not about the scenery. I must take probably more food pictures than scenery pictures when I travel. So I'm completely with you, about enjoying, local cuisine. So thanks for that, Chef Claude.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, the pasalubong we buy in each place. Imagine all that income for the locals.
Right. No, that's a
Bring
great
home.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll get back to you, Chef
Yes.
Claude, during the open forum. And before I introduce our next speaker, and in case you just joined our webinar, I would like to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box in Zoom or the comment section of Facebook Live so we can answer them during the panel discussion later. Now let's move on to our next speaker. And again, I refer back to what Jojo was mentioning earlier. Aside from cuisine, people are looking for local heritage, local history, local culture and arts. And so our next speaker, John Silva, will precisely speak on that. He is the executive director of the Ortigas Library Foundation, devoted to collecting Filipiniana books, prints, maps, photographs, and documents for the benefit of researchers. John was former senior consultant to the National Museum and is contributing writer on the arts and history in various Philippine and international publications. Now, I had the recent privilege and experience of traveling with John to Iloilo, where he is from, for a sentimental journey to my grandfather's hometown for a weekend of heritage house visits and local cuisine. It's a great way of getting the complete travel experience when you have someone like John accompanying you on a trip. So to speak to us today on heritage travel, let's please all welcome John Silva. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm sort of difficult to continue my talk with all that dishes, and all I want to do is leave this place and go home and do my sinigang. Thank you, Claude. It was a little much, but so anyway, my talk today is about the benefits of heritage tourism, and I am about to start my PowerPoint. Let's see, where do I do that now? Oh, here we go. Okay, and then there we go. The benefits of heritage tourism. In our country, heritage tourism does not have the heft, the gravitas that other parts of the country, or the other parts of the country are being promoted, mainly beaches and shopping malls.
Sorry, excuse me, John. I just want to check. We don't have your screen, your slide presentation visible yet.
Oh, okay. Let's see. There we go. Is this it?
Nope,
Mm,
not yet, not coming on.
there. Can you see it?
Mm, No, not yet. Erin, do you have it? Okay, we got it. One of our staffs got it up. John, can you see it now?
Uh, so is that from me or from the staff?
No, that's from the staff, and you can just cue them.
Okay, I will do that.
Sure.
All right. So first slide. Um, heritage in our country, heritage tourism does not have that heft, that sort of gravitas that other parts of our country are being promoted, namely beaches and shopping malls. Heritage houses, buildings, walking tours of old sections of town, monument visits, museums, culinary events, and others that focus on appreciating history and firming up our national identity somewhat play second fiddle to what seems the overall master plan of sun, sand, and malls, which is the current reflection of our identity. In travels to other countries, I note a sense of heritage appreciation than what we have here. Next slide. I've had a Singaporean taxi driver take me to my destination and along the way describe the various vintage buildings and their contemporary reuse today. Next slide. Bangkok's historical section, which include the Royal Palace grounds and the National Museum, can draw thousands of daily visitors just for preservation of the area, just for its preservation. The town, next slide. The town of Luang Prabang in Laos is a magnet to tourists around the world for its peaceful, untouched atmosphere, and it's suffused with Buddhist tranquility. In any Southeast Asian city or town where there is a bustling heritage tourism plan, I meet its citizens and they're very eager to conduct tours both personally or commercially about the historical importance, beauty, and their affection for their sites. They give me a sense of their being centered with their lives, and they are effusive, and they show a love for their country. In a shopping mall at BGC, 100 meters away from the entrance of the American Military Cemetery, next slide, which is the second most visited site by foreign tourists in Manila, I asked a guard or a passerby where it is, and they sort of give me a blank look. I repeat the question in Filipino, and still they give me a blank look, because Filipinos, not all Filipinos, have little sense of their surroundings because they have no sense of their importance. And that goes back to having a sense of self, an identity, a pride. The lack of historical importance is yet again reflected in the concrete markers. Next slide. On the route where over 80,000 Filipinos and American soldiers walked the 60 miles after the surrender in World War II in Bataan, to their eventual prison camps in central Luzon. These markers are set 50 meters apart and are regularly and blithely defaced with graffiti, moved or completely destroyed, and after a while, a veterans group at great expense returns, cleans the markers that are salvageable, or put up new markers. The lack of historical and aesthetic importance is apparent in the demolition of, next slide please, of the 1939 Manila High Alike Club in 2000 by then Mayor Lito Atienza. There was vigorous opposition to it by the group Heritage Conservation Society, stating its importance as a striking example of Art Deco in Southeast Asia. Designed by a famous architect, Weldon Beckett, and ironically survived the massive military destruction of the city in World War II. It did not, however, survive the wrecking ball of a city government. A word on World War II. Most Southeast Asian cities were spared any destruction in the war except Manila. Next slide. And major cities and towns throughout the country. This will always be a sore point for local heritage conservationists who have seen so much old world splendor destroyed that it has been a financial struggle or an indifference to rebuild them. If there is an absence of heritage consciousness in Filipinos, it has much to do with the fact that there is a scarcity of historical treasures around to be proud of and to show off. There are, though, heritage-minded organizations and individual guides throughout the country that have led tours of period homes, next slide, of old neighborhoods, and historical site. This is one of those beautiful houses around the Square Plaza in Pila, Laguna. But they are a small lot in comparison to the major tour operators that may occasionally take on historical sites, but are much more inclined to do the beaches and the resorts. Yet, I must let you in on a secret. Heritage tourism brings on wealthy tourists. I was doing tour guiding over 10 years ago, and I was conducting these tours for up to 20 people around the Philippines and Southeast Asia. The sites visited were historical, architectural, and towns that had turn of the century and up to the 30s atmosphere. My guests signed up word of mouth, and they were mostly of a class level, middle class to CEOs, to wealthy informal groups of ladies, the diplomatic corps, or those with just a particular interest like Art Deco in Asia. We'd stay in five-star hotels, driven around in limousines, or at times flown in helicopters and private planes. These guests were affluent, well-educated, and desired to learn, next slide please, about Asia and its different facets. This is one of the most famous Art Deco department stores in Shanghai. My role was to make sure they had a steady diet of lectures and readings about the sites we were visiting. Next slide. And they were introduced to locals who were engaged in their native crafts, next slide, environmental practices, and the preservation of their culture. It was a daunting job because these guests were not passive folks. They were being brought around. They asked a lot of questions. But in the end, the hefty fees I charged and the generous tips I received were well worth the trouble. In this new normalcy and revenge travel, it behooves the government and the private sector in tourism to look into the prospects and financial benefits of heritage tourism. This is not to imply there has been no investment or support in that area, but we can agree that there could be more support in that area. It's not an easy task. Just the training alone of heritage tourism guides will be qualitatively more demanding. Next slide. Training in language fluency and in the other languages of the advanced world will be a must. And I don't mean teaching them in sort of call center diction. There is a refinement and a deportment needed in guides and an anticipatory skill required to keep wealthy tourists at ease and satisfied with one's delivery. A guide must learn to run herd on these types of tourists who in their work lives run herd over many, even hundreds or thousands of people. Next slide. A heritage guide must know his subject through and through and must not ever invent anything. These clients are well-read and highly educated and can also Google whatever has been uttered. Next slide. For heritage tourism to flourish in a country is to divide the marketing pie of Philippine tourism with an increase in support funding. This is not to diminish the cash cow that is Boracay, El Nido, Bohol, and other beach experiences. However, visits to monuments, historical sites, heritage homes and buildings, indigenous and ethnic enclaves, gardens and estates, and all the elements that amplify our rich past could use such an increase in apportionment. These results would be remunerative. More tourist dollars spent for every heritage tourist. Let me end by what I mentioned earlier, that heritage tourism creates a national pride among its students in countries where they thrive. I recall a visit to the Rizal Shrine in Dapitan. I don't like the name shrine. It feels like as if Rizal and his works are all locked in glass and candles burning. I'd rather just call it Rizal's home in exile, making it more a tantalizing visit. One Sunday at Rizal's home, I strolled through the well-trimmed grounds of his estate that he bought after winning the lottery. I noticed at a distance a young girl sweeping the grounds. At some point, we walked towards each other and I curiously asked her if she had lived nearby, and she pointed at the direction of her house. I asked where her parents were and she replied they were at home. I then asked, was she being paid for her sweeping that Sunday morning? She stopped sweeping and looked at me and in attention said simply, "This is my duty." Jose Rizal is our national hero, she adds. And she proceeded to point to the various structures on the compound, the large main house Rizal had designed and built for himself, his companion Josephine Bracken, and his family. It had a terrace view of the bay and a perfect vantage point for sunsets. A smaller, next slide, please. A smaller, many-sided, next slide too, please. A smaller, many-sided house and his planned walkways to various projects. The girl was very well versed, very proud, almost something I rarely ever see. So to end, heritage tourism has numerous benefits, and one of them instilling a sense of pride and place for its citizens. Thank you. That's the end of my talk.
Thank you. Thank you, John. I like, how you stress that there's both of course, a commercial benefit to historical tourism, heritage tourism, but at the same time, and I think even more importantly, is that the building of a sense of pride in a place. And you and I, we've seen this in other parts of the world, and we've seen this also in other parts of the country, how people are very proud of their place and of their heritage. And I think that's something that we should nurture over time. So thank you for those insights, and thanks for the examples that you showed from the other countries. You showed Laos, and you showed Bangkok, you showed Singapore, and I think we need to take lessons because those countries have executed very well on their heritage sites and on their history. Now, we're going to move on to the panel discussion and Q&A. But before I do that, I want to ask a couple of questions, okay? So for the audience to answer. And the first question is, are you planning to travel in the next 2 or 3 months? Okay. It's a simple yes or no. Are you planning to travel in the next 2 to 3 months? Yes or no? In other words, do you want to take part in a little revenge travel or sit it out a bit more? Oh, Jojo, this is good for your industry. A lot of people are just absolutely wanting to get out of their homes and travel. 90% say yes, 10% say no. Okay, so let me ask the next question. Is it going to be domestic, international, or both? Okay, is your travel going to be domestic or international or both? Okay, let's see the responses. Oh, okay, domestic, 56%. Okay, some domestic and international, so that's a good sign for domestic tourism, but we see international traffic also picking up as well. So thanks for that. Now we have an idea of what's going to happen, for the industry, I guess, and how that can bounce back. So, Jojo, let's start with you. From your experience, what are you seeing as currently maybe the most popular destinations or the most sort of popular experiences that people are looking for? I know you mentioned a few. Are there things that really stand out in your head as where do people really want to go and what are they looking for when they travel?
Well, coming out of the pandemic, I think people really wanted to have a breath of fresh air. So people started to visit Boracay, which will, as I mentioned earlier, was breaching carrying capacity during the Holy Week. Baguio again is a favorite, no? In terms of driving from one place to another, Baguio is always a favorite, and there's been a resurgence of travel. Palawan, I think people would have wanted to travel to Palawan also, but I think as of the Holy Week or even before that, there were still some stringent rules. No, you still needed your RT-PCR test. Kaya medyo it was sort of a deal breaker for a lot of people. Uh, I was in Bohol quite recently, and we were quite surprised that a good mixture of foreign travelers and domestic travelers were also in Bohol. So the popular places are back in play as far as destinations are concerned. Um, but at the same time, we're also developing new products in those areas. No, like in Bohol, we went to Hagna where there were waterfalls, new waterfalls that weren't offered before. There were salt making. There was a salt making place where we went to where they showed the old traditions of doing that, and people were coming in, and those were things that weren't there before. So it sort of totally plays into the observations that we had from our clients that these are the new things that certainly people will be looking for post pandemic.
How about a place like, say, Georgia? How about a place like Siargao, hit very hard by Odette?
Yeah.
Um, is it recovering quickly? And the second question I have is, what new destinations do you think will emerge over the next 5 years or so? A
Mm.
place that maybe not too many people are going to today,
Mm-hmm.
but in 5 years, it's going to be very popular. I can remember, of course, when in the 80s when nobody knew about Boracay. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
today this
Mm-hmm.
place is the most popular destination in the country. But these places all start as really unknown, hard to get to places. So,
Mm-hmm.
what about Siargao now, and what about new destinations?
Okay. Siargao is still recovering. Some establishments are already up. Last I heard, there were still problems with electricity and some basic utilities, but I think they're finding ways around that. They should be up and ready by the time the peak season for tourism kicks in towards the end of the year. In terms of new destinations, I'll just give you one that really it's always in the back of my mind. It's a place people have to visit at least once in their lives. No, Sikihor.
Mm.
I've been to Sikihor quite a few times, and it's quite funny because among us locals, but there's this impression of Sikihor as being the place for aswang, mga manananggal, mga mangkukulam. But once you get there, it's really, I'd even call it like a spiritual place. It's so quiet, it's so peaceful. Things are just so laid back. Na if you're looking for a place to just totally recharge and just get away from the world, Sikihor would be a nice place to go. It's not yet crowded. The roads are actually quite nice. I was very surprised by it. And you have a few resorts there that can really cater to all markets, if they wanted to go there. Ang problema lang with Sikihor is that you can just access it from either Dumaguete or Bohol for now. Those are the easiest ways to access it. Wala pang direct flights into it. But I've always said na give it a few more years, people will discover it, and it's such a wonderful place to go to.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks. I agree with you. I've been to Sikihor, and it's a very, very enjoyable place to go to.
Mhm.
Claude, let me ask you, there's a question here in the Q&A box. Is there any government agency, NGO, or any group that documents and keeps an archive of heritage recipes? Maybe for Claude or for John, do you see heritage recipes?
Now, I haven't come across anything done by government or NGO. As a matter of fact, there will be like private individuals who have done recipe books doing that. Like here in Pampanga, there's one by Aching Lilian Borromeo, in Kalutong Kapampangan. It's the name of the title of the book, somewhere here. So anyway, other than that, I don't know of any government involvement.
Okay. John, how about you? You mean you took me and a group of cousins on a great trip and visit to a heritage house with really traditional local cuisine. But is that all written up, or that's just in the memory of the owner of that house, and she just whips up this fantastic traditional farm to table meals?
This reminds me of the conference in Manila where Claude was the lead speaker, and he was being asked by a foreigner or a Filipino American, I think,
Yeah, I remember.
the exact recipe for adobo. He wanted to know the milliliter and how many garlic, how much chop this and how much chop that. And Claude just looked at him just totally shocked, because in reality, as Claude says, every house has their version of
Yeah,
adobo. And in that house, there are all these people who cook. They also have their own little versions of adobo. So we don't, in fact, what we do have is we have books by authors like Claude, who write up their books and their particular recipe of Filipino food, but we don't store anything for archival. The only essential perfect adobo recipe ever. No, we don't have that.
Yeah, if I may add to that,
Yeah.
Michan, my Philippine Star column page.
Yeah, Michan, can you post that up?
Can you how is that? Pull it out?
Yep.
So there was this move by the DTI, July 2021, last year. It came out with a press release saying like they're calling for the standardization of the adobo recipe.
Oh,
So
yes.
there was a lot of uproar there, much to adobo riot. So that started the whole series for me. And in the end, I mean, it's all for nothing, meaning they just made it like a quiet exit. Like it's really impossible to do. So I mean, yeah, as John mentioned, like I keep saying, like there's as many kinds of adobos as there are households. It's like in the millions.
Yeah. So I guess every region's got its own.
Yeah, not just region, but even for us, for example, a household of 3, I like it somehow saucy to your rice flavor your rice with. My wife likes it dry. Talagang gusto niya anything dry. and then
Mhm.
and then the Kapampangan way actually is with atay, with
Yeah.
a what do you call it?
Liver.
Chicken or pork liver.
Mhm.
It's even documented in Let's Cook with Nora.
Mhm.
Mm.
She had two kinds of adobo in that cookbook. You know, it's a classic cookbook, right? It's been with us like for two or three
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah.
Published in 1968, I think. So, but the thing is, if you read between the lines, basing on the two adobos she wrote, one is from Batangas, where his father was from, Batangas, and it's with achuete, so color orange.
Mm.
Yeah.
And then the other one is just called chicken and pork adobo. But if you read the recipe, it has chicken liver. Tita Nora's mother was a Guanson from Santa Rita, Pampanga.
Ah.
So there you go. So basically a recipe or a dish that I cook, for example, uh, gives like what do you call that? A trace or it it shows where the maker, the chef, is from. With again leading to last week's WTTC conference, the summit. I was
Yes.
invited to participate by serving one dish
Mhm.
from Pampanga, which is of course like the sisig. And I was one of 12 other Filipino chefs to contribute one dish each. And each one presented their own dish from the region they are from. And in a way, this shows the diversity of our cuisine. It was a very, very good lineup, meaning it gives a good cross section of what we have to offer. And from what I gathered, who was it? No, was it you, Jojo, who
Yes.
said your seatmate at the table? You
Yes.
attended
Yes.
at the opening at the dinner, right?
Yes.
Mentioned that. Can
Yes.
you
Yes.
share it?
It was the best food. Yeah.
Best
Oh
food
yeah. When
summit
they said, yeah,
they've
it was.
attended.
They were surprised at the volume because a lot of them were Europeans, where they don't really eat that much for dinner. But because of the quality of the food that was being served during that dinner, one of my seatmates was a foreigner. Said this is the best food that they have tasted. In situations or in big social gatherings like that, na where you expect everything is sort of like ano lang yung mass produced lang. But
Mhm.
when they tasted the food, it was like they said every morsel was purposely made to taste as good as it should. So sabi ko, well, that's how we are. Sabi kong ganon. So it really spoke volumes about Filipino cuisine.
That 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 must have been a great meal and a great introduction to tourism in the Philippines. Because Jojo, I know what you mean. It wasn't one of these rubber chicken dinners
Yeah,
or
yeah,
rubber chicken lunches that
yeah.
we get used to sometimes. But, you really get a gourmet
Yeah,
meal, right?
yeah,
Okay, no,
yeah.
that's great. That's great. Um, Let me go back to a question on travel. Jojo, any advice to people? How do you adjust? The many, 90% of the people say they're going to travel
Hmm.
in the next 2 to 3 months,
Yes.
and more than half, are combined for domestic and international travel.
Mhm.
So, what advice would you give? How to adjust to travel in this time of COVID? Because everything has become a bit tedious
Mm, mm.
in this COVID and post-COVID situation. Any bit of advice?
Well, the piece of advice is probably the same thing we dispensed during, after 9/11, was that there will be a lot of procedures in place. Pack along with your clothes some patience to go along with it. And as we saw, after 9/11, we had so many security measures. Take your laptop out of your bag, take off your belt, your shoes, until it came to a point where we just got used to it. So we'll get used to it. just think about the new procedures as something that's meant to keep you healthy, keep you safe, and also to protect the communities that you're visiting. So, the biggest advice I can give is just be patient and go along with it.
That's good advice, Jojo. Along with your clothes, pack some patience. I think
Yeah,
that's a nice
yeah,
practical approach.
yeah.
Oh,
Just go along, go with the flow. That's
go with
it.
the flow.
Go with the flow.
Okay. Jojo, also a question for you. Any practical tips for college students,
Mm-hmm.
okay, who are taking hospitality and tourism courses?
Mm-hmm.
How do they experience revenge travel given the restrictions on educational field trips and tours? What do you propose?
I think
And for the
that's
budget conscious as well, no?
well, in terms of like official school trips, I think that's the mandate of CHED. So parang may limit yata to us where they can go, how they can, parang ganun eh. So I'm not too sure about how you can do it, but in their free time, uh, if they have the budget for it, as I think we mentioned earlier, you can do tours by land muna, which makes it cheaper. And then if you want to go to the other islands, take advantage of the promos that are being released by airlines and even by hotels. No, I just saw kanina one of our domestic carriers will again be offering their 99 peso fares, so take advantage of that. And then you can also go to your local tour operators or travel agents, and we also get offers from hotels na for the local market. So it doesn't have to be an arm and a leg to go. Yun lang, you have to be flexible about it, not to be so particular about where you stay. I mean, we won't give you a rat trap, but 'di ba? If you're a college student, of course, expect mo naman you can stay in somewhere that's more Spartan probably than a 2 3 star resort. Pero if it's experience you're after, then it shouldn't matter.
Thanks, Jojo. Let me go to John Silva. There's a good question here. Can tours to local historical sites be made mandatory for all students of basic education, for them to have the sense of awareness of what they have within their reach and develop that sense of pride as a Filipino? Believe that I believe that every province or even municipality has a lot to offer.
Well, when I was at the National Museum, it was almost mandatory that grade school kids, high school kids, all at least once a year make a visit to the National Museum. The problem is when they're at the National Museum, is then teachers have not been trained to try and figure out what the students are seeing. They are dependent then on the tour guides like us to be able to explain things. But we can't always be there. Sometimes there are thousands of kids in the National Museum. So we also depend on the teachers to be able to amplify and explain what's happening. There's a lack of that.
Mhm.
So I see a procession of kids going from one gallery to the other without a real sense of imbibing what they're seeing. And maybe 10%, 15% of the kids who really have this inclination to love art and culture get it. But I think the greater part of our children and visitors, young visitors to the National Museum, don't get it. So there's a lot of training and education necessary. But it's
John,
there.
yeah, John, let me add, because I think it's a great idea going to the National Museum, and we also have a lot of sort of historical sites
Mm-hmm.
around the country.
Mm-hmm.
We've got churches
Mm-hmm.
in places like Iloilo, Karkar, other places. You have heritage
Mm-hmm.
houses
Mm-hmm.
like this. Now, museums, it's become almost standard to get audio guides
Mm-hmm.
for museums.
Yeah.
Do you see room for some technology to be used combining with smartphones to create audio guides, but you can listen to it over your phone.
Yeah.
You don't have to rent the device.
Mm-hmm.
Especially it's good if you're outside, not inside a museum, but you see a
Mm-hmm.
church and you can get an audio guide on that church
Mm-hmm.
downloadable.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see a possibility of that?
Oh, absolutely. There's already use of the QR code. In some of the artifacts, you sort of point at it, the QR code, and it explains to you what it is. But the audio part, that's a little bit more expensive, and is something that is very limited to purchase. No? But yes, the technology can be used, but I totally still believe that a person to person kind of training is what will grab the attention span of students, because they have to listen. For example, my greatest museum site is outdoor, is the American Military Cemetery in Makati. I take people there, a lot of people there, and I go through this whole almost dramatic role of paying tribute to 17,000 of the dead there that fought for our country. And you have to then act it all out and make people understand that these were young men, 18 years old, average, and they all fought for our country. And so you want to give an hour of this kind of sense among the young, that this is a very important place, and that they must respect the dead, and that they must understand World War II. So it's face to face. It's got to be face to face.
Yeah. Okay. No, I
Bill,
think that's a great point.
Bill,
Let's talk a little bit about heritage conservation, John. I mean, you talked about Manila got bombed. You talked about buildings being demolished. Really classics going down, like the High Alive building. What can we do, to promote more heritage conservation? And for instance, for those who own ancestral homes and heritage homes, can they be given some sort of a break somehow to preserve, the home, like maybe given a break on the property tax, or tax breaks on the maintenance costs for their heritage homes? What can be done to preserve these buildings or these homes?
Well, first is even before we even talk about tax breaks, is the inclination of the families to hold on to a house and really go fight for the preservation of that home, because there is a greater tendency to say sell it,
mhm.
demolish it, put up a high rise. It's so clear to so many people. So the tide against heritage preservation is very strong, and we have yet to really change our thinking. The other day, my very old classmate, who was one of the most beautiful, stately 19th century house in by the Pasig, wants to sell it. He's 70 years old. He's too old for it. His kids don't want. The kids are in the States. His siblings are older than him. It's a familiar story, and I'm aghast at the fact that he just mentions it, when in fact I thought that the family was going to keep this house for years and years and years and years. But it's time. It's getting tired. It's so there's so many uphill battles before you even get to tax incentives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill,
Yes, please go ahead, Jojo.
if I may, I really love everything that Mr. Silva has been saying, because a lot of his frustrations are also frustrations that are felt by stakeholders such as myself, or tour operators. One reason why cities, no, and I'll say Manila, for example, is being bypassed is because people see it as uninteresting. It's like any other big city around the world, so they think it's just an urban jungle. But then you take them to places like Intramuros, and suddenly their eyes light up. There's something like this here pala. Or even to a place like the Chinese cemetery, where they're seeing all of these, parang, what is this? They build tombs like this here. So it's up for our audience, no, especially those who are really involved with LGUs, to come up or even just to maintain the cultural values of their respective LGUs, to maintain it, to keep it, to preserve it, to restore it even, um, to keep it relevant. Kasi the more that you have products for us to sell as tour operators, the more we can really promote these cities. Ngayon, most cities, we just tend to overlook it because there's not much historical significance. Eh. And as Mr. Silva said, yeah, no, people tend to sell ancestral places. They tend to just let it go to waste. And whatever people may think, for example, of Jerry Acosar and what he's done with Las Casas, ako sabi ko sa sarili ko, at least he's making an effort to preserve it.
I agree.
Okay?
I
Maybe
agree.
he's uprooting these houses from where they originally are, which is a shame, but there's no one to take care of it. So sabi niya, let's just buy it, put it here, and let people enjoy it.
Mhm.
So those are the kinds of things that we can do. We don't need to transport it to Bataan or to Quezon City where the other place is, but especially where they are. Frustration ko yan also as an amateur historian, no? Mr. Silva and I were talking about it prior to the presentation. History is something that we don't really take cognizance of as Filipinos. Kaya wala tayong idea of what we are, where did we come from. And in the same sense, we cannot express it to our visitors, to our tourists as well. Not unless you're a historian by nature and you learn all of these things. But even our tour guides, sad to say, some of them are really not conversant in the real history that would make it interesting for tourists to view
Right.
major cities. So hopefully there will come a time wherein we can have historians really interact with tour guides to give the authentic sense of what a certain place is, para we can make it more attractive.
Thanks. Claude, let me go back to you and let's talk food. Uh, have you ever conducted or have you ever been approached to do a couple of things? Let's say a whole itinerary, a travel itinerary, but based on food. People just selected the places to visit and traveled around the region just to experience the food, or just to even have you give them a master cooking class. Has that ever happened?
Well, let me put it this way. I stay put here in Baledutong. But the thing is, there's like several groups who does that, like Pampanga-wide food tours for the day, like
Mhm.
12-hour, starting from Makati. You ride a bus, you have breakfast in San Fernando at Everybody's Cafe or with Achililian, and then have merienda somewhere. I mean, segundo, the mid-morning snack somewhere, and then the highlight would be the midday lunch here in Baledutong, and then in the afternoon by sunset they have like sisig at Aling Lusing, and the last time I heard, just to give you a concrete name, Anton Diaz of Awesome Planet used to do those tours, and
Mhm.
I've joined several like culinary heritage tours in Iloilo, as John has mentioned. Also in Ilocos Norte, in Ilocos Sur as well, vegan. I mean, each like regional or locality would have their, which I call the what? The culinary warriors. I mean, they promote their own local, their own place. So there are tours to join in Taal, Batangas. For one is Dindo Montenegro. I featured him in my Chasing Flavors show, and he does that. I mean, for a living as a culinary tour guide.
Yeah.
So you pay a lump sum, a fixed price, and then you will have like 5 dishes in 5 different localities. So there's a lot of that going
Oh,
on.
that sounds terrific. The Batangas one, I hope, includes Maliputo or something like that, huh?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. No, that would be great, Claude. I mean, I really think that Filipino cuisine is kind of a bit overlooked by tourists, and
Yes.
not really fully appreciated. And yet now we get news that I think it was Chicago, a Filipino restaurant just
First,
got got a Michelin
Michelin
star,
star. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
amazing. So I'm just thinking, if I ever go to Chicago, I will look up that restaurant and try to book a
Definitely.
table
Yes.
at that Michelin star restaurant. No, I'm getting a comment here from one of our fellow Steercom members at Livable Cities, Ida Johnson, about she wants to join the food tours. And yeah, Ida, I think it's a great thing we ought to do. And I'm going to ask John. John, explain a little what you did for us. When for me and family, when we went to Iloilo and we ate in Balay na Bato, because not only was the house beautiful, the food was truly outstanding and a good example of local cuisine. So, John, maybe you can walk us through how you kind of put that terrific lunch together.
Well, it was from highly recommended by the locals because I had not been there, but it was highly recommended by local friends, locals who live in Iloilo. They had a fixed number of people needed, about 18 people and above, to make a major feast composed of 12, 15 dishes, everything from appetizers to dessert, and then the whole house was yours, etc. This woman was such an incredible believer in farm to table kind of stuff that she was very proud of that. She was proud of the chocolate that she was serving, again, locally grown, etc., and locally milled, etc. I was just plain lucky to have been able to secure that place because they were busy and we had the numbers. And so I made sure that we had that day and that we were going to be there on time. And she was very lax about reservation. I mean, about reserving money, but there it happened, and we were just so pleased, and I think I got so much commendation from that, even though I really didn't have anything to do with it, except that I was lucky. It's a beautiful, incredible place.
Yeah. So John took us to this Balay na Bato, and yeah, the truly authentic farm to table, slow cooked, and we walked through every dish with the woman who owned and managed the house, and she could explain the source for every dish. It was completely amazing, and of course all traditional Ilonggo food. I see Claude raising his hand. He's getting
Yes.
excited.
Yeah.
Go,
Well,
Claude.
going back to the food tours, a lot of well, like families or individuals are doing self tours, right? So
Right.
2 months ago, Sandy Dasa and I did a food crawl of Angeles City. We shot, it was done for ANC, for Metro Channel, and we shot it like in a 12-hour span. I mean, the whole, like from 9 a.m. to like 9 p.m., actually extended to 11 p.m. when we all parted. So the thing was, like, there were like 5 destinations. And if you want to view it and follow that tour that we did and eat the dishes that we ate, you go to YouTube, Food Crawl Angeles. You will find it.
Okay. No,
Food
that's
Crawl
And I've gotten like text messages, like they've done it with the family, or I get feedback from the restaurant owners texting me that they have a group eating at their place because they watch the show.
food crawl. Yeah, that's great. Claude, now we talked about, Baladutung. You have like 3 hours, 10 courses. In a couple of minutes, could you kind of describe what our culinary experience is going to be like if we visit at Baladutung? And I suppose we need to make a reservation and have a minimum number of people, maybe.
Yes, actually, it's like it works like this. thing is you have to reserve, and we don't normally accept walk-ins, and you have to reserve in advance, and you can choose the menu. Like you will be given a choice from our usual, I mean, not usual, but we have a set of menu of dishes that you can dagdag bawas. You can change because, I mean, due to like personal
Allergy.
reasons, allergies or what,
Yeah.
we will change it. But the best, the most popular one will be the 5 ways lechon. We serve the lechon in 5 different ways.
Ooh.
So that, and
yes.
what's
I remember.
surprising, if you they have that, and yet they would request for another popular dish, the oxtail kare kare. I mean, imagine all that food. Well, we pace you. That's why it takes 3 hours. It's not served all at once. So we pace you. That's why para bang marathon yan. You don't sprint the first one on the first dish. Like, gobble up the tapos mabubusog ka na on the second dish, yung ganon. So we will be pacing you. So we will, you know, it's a leisurely lunch. It's a leisurely meal, lunch or dinner. And there. So we are on Facebook, Baledutong, and at the same time, I can give you my wife's number, my bossing, who does all the bookings and reservations.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine, Claude, and the food's always good because I mean I've pre-COVID I was kind of a semi-regular visitor to downtown.
Cafe, yes.
Yeah, so you know
Yeah.
the food is excellent in Angeles City as well. Let me go to the last question, and I'd like to address this to Jojo and to John. No, so your comments on heritage and culture tourism have really struck a chord in the among the audience, and people are asking, and I guess maybe it's also asking and maybe making suggestion. Do we have advocacy groups who are into promoting Filipino heritage, whose messaging can penetrate our youth in particular, but I guess everybody? And can we somehow form an established and functional heritage historical team or committee? And maybe this is something that can be addressed to you, Jojo. You know, is Tourism Congress? Do you have a committee that can really push this? Because I think there's a lot of interest in this. Let's start with you, Jojo, and then let's go to John.
Right. Well, as an organization, yes, we can push for heritage conservation. It's part of our advocacies actually, because it serves the entire industry. It's something that we can form. Of course, we would need the help of people like Mr. Silva and some other historical, groups that are into World War II and other eras of Philippine history. Ang ano natin dyan, the only thing there is that we would need support from government as far as actually conserving and preserving these sites. Ang problema dyan, as we have seen, is that sometimes government doesn't really care. With the example of Mr. Silva ng Hayalay Room, despite all of the protests, despite of all the petitions to have it, to keep it as it is, it wasn't really followed. So, following that, I think we need to have really strong voices that will lend to such an advocacy group. But definitely, tourism would be in the forefront of heritage conservation, and maybe from this discussion that we have, it's something that we can move forward with. I'd love to form a group that would do it.
Yeah, thanks, Jojo. John, what do you think? Is there a group, or can a group be formed to promote more heritage and culture tourism?
There should be, but the group that I was once belonged to was the Heritage Conservation Society, which is still around, and they're doing well. At this point in my life, I would like to just be informal, an informal teacher. For example, in our recent trip to Iloilo, we had these young guides who conducted the tours, and they were from the mayor's office, and it was their very first time. We were like one of their very first audiences. So I had a talk with one of them, and I said, you know what? I come to Iloilo regularly. The next time, I promise I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna visit you guys, and I will teach you what I know of tour guiding 101. Because there were some things in the way your deportment, the way you presented yourself, you were a little too shy, or you were a little too this or that. But I know they wanted to really get into the groove of tour guiding. I could see their excitement. So this, in fact, this talk now again reminds me of what I had promised them, Bill. So I got to, within the next 3 months, pay them a visit again, and especially with an incredible mayor there who's very supportive. I know that I'll be able to have a chance to talk to them and do these lectures of training 101 that I have done in the past.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, John. I mean, those two young tour guides, they were enthusiastic and, you know, really did their best, and I thought did a great job, and I think they have a good future ahead of them. And I think people will enjoy their being in the audience, you know, being part of their groups, to be toured around Iloilo, because I think it's just a great way to enjoy the city and to learn about the city.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, I'm afraid we're running out of time, but this has been a great conversation. I think I come away, you know, thinking that there's so much more we can do to have a really total travel experience to a place. Not only enjoying the destination, but a large part of it has to do with enjoying the history, the heritage, the culture, the arts, and the cuisine of these places. And I might add that doing that, we are supporting a large part of that local economy, a large part of the local food chain and the value chain, and that the communities or the cities themselves can contribute to that total experience and benefit from that experience. So I think this is something we need to think about and be more conscious about when we travel around the Philippines. And again, I go back to what John was showing, that when we take a look at what other cities have done around the region, um, what they, you know, with their heritage sites, you know, when we take a look at Bangkok and other places, I mean, in Indonesia and its temples, I mean, there's a lot that can be learned and in terms of the benefits for our tourism industry and for the country. So maybe before we formally close, I just want to make sure we turn on all our cameras and get a quick picture of the panel and the team. Let's. Is someone going to take care? Erin or Michan will take care of taking our picture.
Yes, sir.
I'm taking a picture now. Smile, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, John. Okay, Michan, you got it?
Yes, sir.
All right, thanks. Okay, so just let me go over a few announcements before we close. First, there is an event evaluation form. So if you're on Zoom, when you exit the Zoom, you'll automatically get the form will appear on your screen. For those on Facebook, the form can be accessed through the QR code on your screen that you will now see on Facebook. And of course, we welcome all your feedback, because it enables us to improve our Livable Cities Lab series. And for those of you in need of a certificate of participation, you will get one after you answer the survey question, the feedback form. I'd like to thank all our partners once again. We have the League of Cities of the Philippines, and you know, we work close in partnership with Globe Telecom. And let me just maybe announce our next Livable Cities Lab. That's going to be May 18th. So we're going to do that after elections. And with school opening, we're going to go back and revisit what we need to do in livable cities for the return to school and to improve the educational system in a post-COVID situation as we re-enter face-to-face schooling. I'd like to thank our speakers today, uh, John Silva, Chef Claude Tayag, Jojo Clemente from Tourism Congress, and of course, Tourism Secretary Berna Romulo for her message. I'd like to thank all of you in the audience. I hope you enjoyed this session as much as
We
I
did.
did,
I did.
as much as
I
we
did.
all did. And I'd like to
I want to
encourage
eat. I'm
everyone
so
to
hungry.
I want to encourage everyone to travel. And of course, I'm sure by now everyone's hungry after all of Claude's insights on food and photographs. So everybody go and enjoy your own merienda right now. Thanks, everybody.
Early
you.
dinner.
Bye.
Thank you.
For an early dinner.
Bye. Bye, Claude. Bye,
Bye.
Bill.
Bye, John.
Bye,
Bye,
Jojo.
bye, John. Bye, Claude.
See
Take
Jojo,
care.
thank you, guys.
Take care.
Yeah, take care. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, let's
Was
do it
fun.
again. Okay.
Do it again.
Can we stay on a few minutes, guys?